I used to believe patience and fairness were enough to build a family. I gave my time, my money, and my respect only to receive contempt in return. The defiant looks, the disrespectful remarks of, "You're not my dad," became routine. They treated me like a stranger in my own home. He wanted all the privileges of a son without the basic respect of a family member. I could have gotten angry, but my work as an investigator taught me that emotion is the enemy of precision. If, according to him, I wasn't a father, then what was my actual role in this system? The boy had drawn a line in the sand, and I decided to respect it absolutely. I didn't change my attitude, I changed his entire reality. That night, instead of an argument, I drafted a new household operating protocol, a document that would redefine the exact meaning of living under my roof. My name is Jacob, and I'm an investigator. My job has taught me to look at the truth, no matter how uncomfortable, and to believe in a fundamental principle. Every action leaves a trace, and every trace leads to a consequence. I've applied that principle throughout my 20-year career. I thought I was prepared for anything. At 44, I was accustomed to the darker side of humanity, but nothing could have prepared me for losing my first wife. My daughter, Lily, was born the same day she passed away. For the next 10 years, my world shrank to the size of that little girl. Every decision, every breath, every dollar I earned served a single purpose: to ensure Lily had a safe life. She was my compass, my reason for waking up each morning. I no longer thought about my own happiness, focusing only on raising her. She was everything, the only reason I kept moving forward. I thought that door had closed forever. Then Sarah appeared. She wasn't loud or pushy. She was just patiently present. She saw me as a man, not a walking tragedy. More importantly, she treated Lily with a genuine tenderness. I don't know when it happened, but having dinner with her in the evenings made the house feel less cold. I began to think that maybe I could build a home again. We got married. Lily and I opened our door to welcome Sarah and her 2 children. Just like that, our family grew. From 2, we became 5. My and Lily's house now included Sarah and 2 kids. Liam, a lanky 6-year-old boy, and Olivia, his 4-year-old sister. Their biological father, Michael, lived about a 20-minute drive away and saw them on alternating weekends. A new family began. On paper, it was a logical union. I had management experience. Sarah brought warmth. In theory, it was enough to make a home. But my professional experience taught me every system, no matter how perfect it seems, has a fracture line. It's just a question of when it shows. I didn't enter this marriage with the illusion that everything would be smooth from the start. Blended families always have sharp edges. I told myself that fairness and consistency would gradually wear down the children's skepticism. That fracture line didn't wait long to appear. I tried. I really tried. I treated Liam and Olivia with the same fairness as I did Lily. I paid for their school field trips, bought sports equipment, and drove them to practice after work. I believed that consistent, unbiased attention would create a bond. In my head, it was a simple equation. Effort plus patience equals family. The first sign appeared about 6 months in. One afternoon, I was carrying several bags of groceries from the car and asked Liam to grab one. That was all. He looked me dead in the eye, his gaze blank, and said, "You're not my dad. I don't have to listen to you." Sarah overheard. She frowned and said, "Liam, help Jacob." He grumbled and took the bag, but the message was sent loud and clear. He didn't do it out of respect for me. He did it because his mother ordered him to. I filed the information away and said nothing. That first crack spread quickly. A pattern began to form. Selective hearing. When Sarah asked them to do something, they responded immediately. When I asked, even if it was just to clear their own plate, it was like I was invisible. Or worse, they would look at me, then turn to their mother as if waiting for approval. I was no longer an adult with authority in the house. I was a request pending confirmation, but it only became truly serious when it started affecting Lily. One day, I found her crying in her room. She said Liam had taken her tablet without asking. When she asked for it back, he'd dismissed her. His words, relayed through my daughter's sobs, stuck in my mind like a shard of ice. "Your dad is just the guy my mum married. He doesn't make the rules here." She hadn't just lost her tablet. She'd lost her sense of security in her own home. The home I had built to protect her. I spoke to Sarah. She spoke to her kids. There were forced apologies. Things were calm for a few days. But the pattern was set. The crack grew wider. I knew it was only a matter of time before everything broke. The final incident, the one that shattered it all, happened on a Thursday night. I came home from work, tired, and found Lily sobbing in her bedroom. On the floor were the shattered pieces of a model airplane. It wasn't just a toy. It was the last memento my late wife and I had made for Lily before she passed. It was a tangible piece of memory I had tried to preserve for her. "What happened?" I asked, my voice terrifyingly calm. "Liam," she sobbed. "He wanted to borrow my headphones. I said no, and I didn't need to hear the rest." I went to the living room. Liam was sprawled on the sofa, gaming, headphones on. His world was still perfect. I stood in front of the TV, blocking his view. "Liam, we need to talk," he sighed, pulling one earphone off. "What? About Lily's airplane?" He shrugged. "It was an accident. She said you threw it against the wall." Liam finally looked at me, his eyes full of defiance. "So what? Anyway, you're not my dad. You have no right to question me. This is my mum's house too, and you're just her husband. You are not my parent, you don't make my rules, and I don't ever have to answer to you." He'd said it all, clearly, loudly. A complete declaration. The anger didn't explode. It settled, ice cold. In my mind, everything suddenly became crystal clear. The boy had just given me all the evidence I needed. The case had all its facts, and I, an investigator, knew exactly what to do next. I looked him straight in the eye, letting his declaration hang in the air between us. I didn't react like an insulted father. I reacted like an investigator who had just heard a critical confession from a suspect. Liam had stated it plainly. I was not his father. This meant that within this small system called a family, my position had been defined, and with a clear definition, I just needed to adjust my actions accordingly. I didn't yell. I didn't slam my fist on a table. I just looked at him with the same expression I reserved for people across an interrogation table. No animosity, no pity, just a cold void. I only gave a slow nod. "All right," I said, my voice perfectly calm. "I understand my position now." Then I turned and walked straight to my office. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw a smirk flash across Liam's face. He thought he'd won. Good. Let him think that. I closed the door, not to lock myself away with my anger, but to get to work. I opened my laptop. The screen glowed in the dark room. Instead of opening a case file, I opened a new document. I typed the title, "The New Household Operating Protocol." This wasn't a revenge plan. It was a procedure, a formalization of what Liam had declared. I typed with precision, clinically, not a single word wasted. Article 1, cessation of logistical support. All transport to school, sports practices, friends' houses, extracurriculars is terminated. This responsibility will be fully transferred to the authorized parents, Sarah and Michael. Article 2, cessation of personal financial support. No more weekly allowance, no new clothes, no new shoes, no funds for recreational activities. These expenses are now the responsibility of their biological parents. Article 3, revocation of privileges and amenities. High-speed Wi-Fi network. Password changed. All streaming accounts, Netflix, Disney+, HBO, logged out of all devices. PS5, decommissioned and locked away. Phones, unlimited data plans downgraded to the most basic tier talk and text only. Article 4, support for key life milestones. This clause was specifically for Liam. I will not participate in teaching him to drive. I will not permit the use of my vehicle. I will not add his name to my family's car insurance policy. I read the protocol again. Perfect. No loopholes. Every clause was a direct consequence of Liam's declaration. That evening, after the kids were in their rooms, I showed the document to Sarah. She read it, her expression shifting from confusion to a pale shock. "Jacob, this is too extreme," she said, her voice trembling. "It's not extreme, Sarah. It's precise," I replied, my voice steady. The boy drew a line. He said, "I am not his father. I am simply respecting that line. Everything on this list is a privilege and a responsibility that comes from a father. If I'm not his father, then those things no longer exist. It's that simple." We had a long talk, but I didn't waver. This wasn't a negotiation. It was a statement of fact. The next morning, I called a mandatory family meeting at the breakfast table. Liam and Olivia looked annoyed. They thought this would be another boring lecture. They were wrong. I placed a printed copy of the protocol on the table. I didn't read it with anger. I read it like a court clerk announcing a directive, clear, cold, devoid of emotion. When I finished, a dead silence fell over the room. Olivia's jaw was hanging open. The smirk on Liam's face had vanished, replaced by utter disbelief. I stood up and folded the paper. "This is not a punishment," I said, looking directly at Liam. "This is respect. You made it clear that I am not your father. I respect that, and these are the actions that demonstrate my respect for your declaration. All future requests are to be directed to your mother, Sarah, and your father, Michael." I picked up my briefcase, ready for a normal day at work. The protocol is effective immediately. I drove to work without looking back. In my rearview mirror, I could see my house, but in my mind, it was a newly established crime scene. The rules had been set. Now, I just had to wait for the fallout. The fallout came faster than I expected. At 10 in the morning, my phone buzzed. It was Sarah. I knew this call was coming. "Jacob, Liam can't submit his homework. Did you really change the Wi-Fi password?" Her voice was incredulous. "I did," I replied curtly. "Article 3. High-speed internet is a privilege. He can use his cellular data. You cut that too. His phone can only make calls." "Correct. An unlimited data plan is also a privilege. If the assignment is urgent, he can go to the public library. Or call Michael." There was a pause on the other end. I heard her sigh. "You're really doing this?" "I'm enforcing the terms, Sarah," I said, and ended the call. That afternoon, I came home at my usual time. The house was strangely silent. The PS5 was collecting dust in the corner. The TV was dark. Liam and Olivia were sitting sullenly on the sofa, staring at me as I walked in. Their glares were no longer defiant, but a mixture of anger and confusion. I nodded at them and walked straight to the kitchen. Over the weekend, phase 2 of the plan commenced. I went shopping alone. When I returned, I placed the bags on the counter. I called for Lily. "This is for my girl." I handed her a brand new pair of wireless headphones, the kind she'd been wanting for months. Her eyes lit up. Liam and Olivia were sitting nearby, pretending not to care, but I knew they were listening. They knew I usually bought things for all three of them. I looked in their direction, my tone completely casual, as if stating an obvious fact. "Oh, as a matter of fact, the store had a buy one get one free deal." I picked up 2 more pairs for Liam and Olivia. I paused, letting a flicker of hope appear in their eyes. But on the way home, I remembered the protocol. Since my role is no longer that of a parent who gives gifts, I went back to the store and returned them. It's a shame, but rules are rules. I saw Liam's jaw tighten. Olivia looked down at the floor. The feeling of losing something you almost had is much more painful than having nothing at all. A small lesson in cause and effect. The final blow was delivered on Friday evening. At dinner, I made an announcement. "This Saturday, I'm taking my family out to that new steakhouse, and then to a movie." I smiled at Sarah and Lily. "You two get ready." Silence. Olivia, perhaps out of shock, blurted out, "What about us?" I turned to her, with no malice, just the clear-cut distinction of an investigator. "This outing is for my roles as husband and father. According to our agreement, my role to you is landlord. Therefore, this activity falls outside our purview. There are frozen pizzas in the fridge you can prepare for yourselves." No one said another word. On Saturday night, as Sarah, Lily, and I got in the car, I glanced through the window. Liam and Olivia were standing in the living room watching us. Under the porch light, I didn't just see 2 angry kids. For the first time, I saw them look lost. They weren't just losing Wi-Fi or gifts. They were beginning to realize what they had actually lost. The scene had been secured. The evidence had been presented. Now came the psychological interrogation, and I knew it was just beginning. The outing that night was pleasant, at least on the surface. Lily laughed a lot, and Sarah tried to act normal. But I knew what she was thinking. Her gaze would occasionally drift, staring off in the direction of the home we'd left behind. I said nothing. The plan had to be seen through to the end. The silence in the house in the following days grew heavier. It was no longer a sullen silence, but a tangible void. Liam and Olivia moved through the house like ghosts. They no longer looked at me with defiance. In fact, they tried to avoid my gaze altogether. The burden began to fall on Sarah, just as I'd predicted. But it wasn't just a physical burden. She had to drive them everywhere. Her schedule became chaotic. She was tired, and that exhaustion began to curdle into frustration directed at her own children. "I am not your personal chauffeur," I heard her tell Olivia over the phone one afternoon. "Call your dad, Michael, and see. I'm stuck in traffic." Michael, of course, couldn't always be there. He had his own life, his own job. He could provide money, but he couldn't provide time and presence. That was a truth Liam and Olivia were learning the hard way. But the real breaking point, the thing that finally shattered Liam's arrogance, came from Article 4 of the protocol. The clause I had designed specifically for him. One afternoon, Liam came home, his face beaming. He waved a piece of paper in front of Sarah. "Mom, all my friends are starting to get their learner's permits. You have to sign for me." Sarah looked at the paper, then at me. I was at the dining table reading a report, not looking up, but I knew they were both looking at me. "This, you'll have to ask Jacob," she said softly, deflecting the responsibility to me. Liam turned to me, speaking to me directly for the first time in days. His voice was a little hesitant. Can you teach me how to drive?" I slowly folded my report and set it down. I looked him straight in the eye. "Article 4, Liam," I said, my voice even. "I will not participate in teaching you to drive. I will not permit the use of my vehicle, and I will not add your name to my insurance policy. That is the responsibility of a father, which, as you've said, I am not." The excitement on his face vanished. But all my friends are. "Then you should speak to your parents, your mother, Sarah, or your father, Michael. Mom's too busy, and Michael's car is a piece of junk," he blurted out, desperation creeping into his voice. "That is a problem for you and your parents to solve," I replied, then picked up my report again, signaling the conversation was over. That evening, I overheard Sarah talking to her kids in the living room. Her voice was tired but firm. "Don't you see? Do you see what you've done? What you've lost isn't just allowance or rides. You're pushing yourselves out of this family. Jacob has always wanted to treat all three of you the same, but you're the ones who drew the line." Silence was her only reply. I knew I had won, but this wasn't a victory to celebrate. The next morning, as I was making coffee in the kitchen, Liam walked in. He didn't look at me. He stared at the floor, his hands shoved in his pockets. He stood there for a long moment. Finally, he spoke, his voice hoarse, almost a whisper. "Mr. Jacob, I was wrong." I didn't answer right away. I continued pouring my coffee. He took a deep breath. "I don't want to be just a tenant anymore. I need you to be my stepfather again." The confession had been made. The suspect had turned himself in. But in my line of work, a confession is only the first step. The next step is the most important one, reconstructing the scene. I set my coffee mug down on the counter, the sound of ceramic on stone echoing dryly in the quiet kitchen. I turned to face Liam. His usual arrogance was completely gone, replaced by the vulnerability of a kid who realized he'd gone too far. "The role of stepfather isn't a switch you can just flip on and off, Liam," I said, my voice remaining steady. "It's a two-way street. You can't demand everything from it while contributing nothing." He nodded frantically. "I get it. I really get it now." "Good," I said. "Then this conversation isn't over." That evening, I called another family meeting. This time, the atmosphere was completely different. There was no hostility or annoyance, just a tense anticipation. Olivia sat next to her brother, her head down. I didn't tear up the protocol. Instead, I placed a blank sheet of paper and a pen in the middle of the table. "The old protocol was created based on your declaration, Liam. Now, we're going to establish a new agreement based on mutual respect and responsibility from both sides." It wasn't an easy forgiveness. It was a negotiation. We outlined new rules. Chores would be clearly divided. Respectful language was non-negotiable. All requests had to be made with the proper attitude. The privileges were not restored immediately. They became rewards. "You want to learn to drive?" I said to Liam. "Fine. After 1 month of completing all your assigned chores without being reminded, We'll have our first lesson. You want your allowance back? I looked at both of them. It will be reinstated, but it will be tied to a list of completed tasks. No work, no pay. The Wi-Fi password was returned, but on the condition that it would be revoked immediately if disrespectful behavior resurfaced. The process took weeks, then months. It wasn't always perfect. There were times old habits tried to creep back in, but whenever that happened, all I had to do was calmly remind them, we're straying from the agreement, and things would get back on track. Liam had his first driving lesson 1 month later. As I sat in the passenger seat, guiding him on how to release the clutch, I saw a focus and respect in his eyes that had never been there before. Olivia started saying thank you when I drove her to practice. A small thing, but it meant the world. Lily was happy again. She no longer had to walk on eggshells in her own home. The tension had vanished. My relationship with Sarah grew stronger, too. She saw that I hadn't given up. I had fought for our family in my own way. A few months later, when Liam got his driver's license, the first thing he did wasn't to go cruising with his friends. He came to me. Mr. Jacob, do you need to go anywhere? I can drive. I looked at the young man in front of me, the one who had once declared I had no authority over him. I smiled. You know what? Let's take the whole family out for ice cream. On the way there, I looked out the window, then at the rear-view mirror. I saw all 5 of us. It wasn't a forced combination, not my family and her family. It was our family. The scene had been cleared. The case was closed, and this time I was confident that the foundation we'd rebuilt was much stronger, because it wasn't built on assumptions, but on a hard-earned lesson in respect.